Deep in the mountains of the Appalachian region, there runs an old railway line known as the Devil's Spine. The tracks, long abandoned and overgrown, once served as a lifeline to isolated mining towns. Yet it is not the history of the line that keeps people away, but the legend of the phantom train. Locals speak in hushed tones about ghostly sightings and the eerie wails of a train whistle echoing through the valleys at night. One fall evening, 4 college friends, Mike, the adventurous leader, Sarah, the history buff, Dave, the tech enthusiast, and Lisa, the skeptic, decided to explore the legend for a Halloween thrill. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and a Ouija board, they set off toward the Devil's Spine, their hearts pounding with a mix of excitement and fear. The journey began innocuously enough. The path to the tracks was overgrown, and the fading daylight cast long shadows through the trees. As they walked, Sarah recounted the tale. In the late 1800s, a train carrying miners home after a long shift derailed on these tracks. It's said that all aboard perished, and their spirits now haunt the railway, forever trying to reach their destination. Dave scoffed, adjusting his camera. It's just a story, probably made up to scare kids. Lisa rolled her eyes. Exactly. There's no such thing as ghosts. As night fell, they reached the tracks. The moon was full, casting an eerie glow over the rusted rails and surrounding trees. They found an old, dilapidated station house and decided to make camp inside. The air was thick with anticipation as they settled around a small fire, the flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah suggested using the Ouija board to try and contact the spirits. Despite Lisa's protests, they set it up. "Is anyone here with us?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. The planchette moved slowly at first, then more deliberately, spelling out yes. Dave laughed nervously. "One of you is messing with it." "Let's ask something specific," Mike suggested. "How did you die?" The planchette spelled out train. Lisa shivered. "Okay, fun's over. This is getting creepy." Ignoring her, Sarah pressed on. "What do you want?" "Revenge," it spelled out. A sudden cold breeze blew through the station house, extinguishing the fire. Their flashlights flickered and then went out, plunging them into darkness. In the silence, they heard it, a distant, mournful train whistle. The ground beneath them began to vibrate, the sound of an approaching train growing louder. "Impossible," Dave whispered, frantically shaking his flashlight. "There hasn't been a train on these tracks in decades." The whistle grew louder, now accompanied by the rhythmic clanking of metal on metal. Panic set in. "We need to leave," Lisa urged, her voice rising. "Now!" They stumbled out of the station house and onto the tracks, the noise of the phantom train deafening. The moonlight revealed the ghostly outline of an old steam engine barreling toward them. It was translucent, shimmering with an otherworldly light, and filled with shadowy figures staring out from its windows. "Run!" Mike shouted. They sprinted along the tracks, the ghost train gaining on them. The air grew colder, their breath visible in the chill. The whistle was a cacophony of sorrow and rage, echoing through the mountains. Sarah tripped on a loose rail and fell, scraping her knee. Mike and Dave pulled her up, but it was too late. The train was upon them. Instead of passing through, it enveloped them in a blinding flash of light and a deafening roar. When they opened their eyes, they found themselves in a different time. The air was thick with smoke and the sound of machinery. They were aboard the train, surrounded by spectral miners, their faces pale and eyes hollow. The train was not stopping. The faces of the miners turned towards them, and one, with a particularly mournful expression, stepped forward. "Help us," he pleaded. "We cannot rest." Sarah, tears streaming down her face, whispered, "How?" The miner pointed toward the front of the train. "Stop the crash. Save us." Determined, the friends pushed their way through the crowded cars, each filled with desperate, ghostly figures. They reached the engine room where the conductor, a shadowy figure with burning eyes, stood. "You do not belong here," he growled. "We need to stop this train," Mike demanded. The conductor sneered. "You cannot change what is done." With no other choice, Dave lunged at the controls, trying to slow the train. The conductor fought back, and a struggle ensued. Just as the train reached a sharp bend, the very spot where it had originally derailed, Sarah grabbed an old rusted lever, pulling it with all her strength. The train screeched, metal grinding against metal, and began to slow. The ghostly figures around them started to fade, their expressions softening as they found peace. The conductor let out a furious howl before dissolving into the ether. The train slowed to a stop just before the deadly curve. In an instant, the friends were back on the tracks, the phantom train gone. The night was silent, the air still. They sat in stunned silence for a moment, catching their breath. "Did that just happen?" Lisa asked, her voice shaking. "It did," Sarah replied, looking at the spot where the ghost train had vanished. "And we helped them." They made their way back to their car in silence, the weight of their experience heavy on their minds. As they drove away, the distant sound of a train whistle echoed through the mountains one last time, a sound of gratitude rather than sorrow. The legend of the phantom train lived on, but now it was a tale of redemption and rest for the lost souls of the Devil's Spine, and for those who dared to venture there, it served as a reminder that sometimes the past must be confronted to bring peace to the present. In the remote forests of Eastern Europe, there lies a railway track that few dare to speak of, and even fewer dare to traverse. Known to the locals as the Wailing Tracks, this railway line was once part of a bustling route connecting small villages to larger cities. However, after a tragic accident nearly a century ago, the tracks were abandoned and left to decay, becoming the center of chilling legends and ghostly tales. One autumn evening, 5 friends decided to explore the infamous Wailing Tracks. There was Alex, the fearless leader, Maya, the local history buff, Peter, the tech geek, Sophie, the skeptic, and Liam, the thrill seeker. They were all intrigued by the stories they had heard growing up, tales of ghostly apparitions and the haunting sounds of a train that never arrived. Their adventure began as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows through the dense forest. They reached the old station, now nothing more than a crumbling ruin overtaken by nature. The sign above the station, barely readable, bore the name Brenesti. "This is it," Maya said, her voice a mix of excitement and apprehension. This station was abandoned after the train derailment of 1924. The train was carrying dozens of passengers when it mysteriously derailed, plunging into the ravine below. No one survived. "Sounds like an urban legend to me," Sophie remarked, adjusting her backpack. "Ghost trains, haunted tracks, it's all just stories." Peter set up his equipment to document their journey, aiming to capture any paranormal activity. As the night grew darker, the group gathered around a makeshift campfire inside the dilapidated station. Maya began to recount the eerie history of the Wailing Tracks. After the accident, people reported hearing the sounds of a train whistle and the screams of passengers late at night. They say the spirits of those who died are trapped, forever reliving their final moments. "Let's see if we can get some evidence," Alex said, pulling out a digital recorder. "Is anyone here with us?" he called out into the night. For a moment, there was only the crackling of the fire and the rustling of leaves. Then faintly, they heard it. A distant, mournful train whistle echoing through the trees. The sound sent a chill down their spines. "Did you hear that?" Liam whispered, his eyes wide with excitement. "Probably just the wind," Sophie said, though she didn't sound convinced. They decided to explore the tracks, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The forest seemed to close in around them, the air growing colder with each step. As they walked, they stumbled upon an old, rusted train car lying on its side, half buried in the undergrowth. "This must be from the crash," Maya said, running her fingers over the corroded metal. "Look at the damage." Peter aimed his camera at the wreckage, hoping to capture something unusual. "There's definitely a creepy vibe here." Suddenly, the ground beneath them began to vibrate, and the sound of a train whistle grew louder, accompanied by the faint clanking of wheels on the tracks. The friends exchanged nervous glances. "We should head back to the station," Alex suggested, a sense of urgency in his voice. As they turned to leave, a dense fog began to roll in, obscuring their path. The whistle grew louder, and the vibrations more intense. They could now hear the faint, ghostly cries of passengers in distress. Out of the fog, the spectral outline of a train emerged, moving slowly along the rusted tracks. It was translucent, glowing with an eerie light, and filled with shadowy figures staring out from the windows, their faces etched with fear and despair. "Run!" Alex shouted, and they sprinted back towards the station, hearts pounding. The ghost train followed, its whistle a haunting wail that pierced the night. Reaching the station, they huddled together, breathing heavily. The ghost train stopped just outside, its ghostly conductor stepping down from the engine. He was a tall, gaunt figure with hollow eyes and a somber expression. "Why are you here?" the conductor asked, his voice echoing as if from a great distance. "We wanted to understand what happened," Maya said, her voice trembling. "To know your story." The conductor's eyes softened. "We are trapped, reliving the tragedy of that night. The tracks are cursed. You should not have come." "We can help," Alex said, stepping forward. "Tell us how to set you free." The conductor pointed to the train. "You must find the source of the curse. In the ravine where we crashed, there is an old relic, a talisman that holds our spirits here. Destroy it, and we will be free." Determined to help, the friends set out for the ravine, guided by the spectral light of the ghost train. The journey was treacherous, the fog thickening and the cries of the passengers growing louder. When they reached the edge of the ravine, they saw the twisted remains of the train, half submerged in the earth. Maya spotted the talisman, a small ornate box partially buried under debris. "There it is," she exclaimed, rushing to retrieve it. As she touched the box, a wave of cold washed over her, and the ghostly apparitions of the passengers surrounded them, their faces pleading. "Free us," they whispered. With a deep breath, Maya opened the box and found a strange, ancient artifact inside. "This must be it." "Smash it," the conductor urged, appearing beside her. "End our torment." Maya hesitated, then brought the artifact down on a rock, shattering it into pieces. Instantly, the fog lifted, and the spectral figures began to fade, their expressions of sorrow replaced with relief and gratitude. "Thank you," the conductor said, his form growing fainter. "You have given us peace." The ghost train vanished, leaving the friends alone in the now clear night. The forest was silent, the air warm once more. They made their way back to the station, the weight of their experience heavy on their minds. As they left the wailing tracks, they felt a sense of accomplishment. knowing they had helped to end a century of suffering. The legend of the wailing tracks lived on, but now it was a tale of redemption and the bravery of those who dared to confront the past. For those who knew the story, it served as a reminder that sometimes the most haunted places can find peace, if only someone is willing to listen.